And I'm always really fascinated by the kind of the dialogue you have happen between these kind of low-grade mafioso characters, like this kind of these back answers that like I said that, no, you said that, no, banter, you called it, but like I like how you get them to talk about vague philosophical things. Like, I mean, it's played for laughs, obviously, but I think it's really interesting and like kind of like the kind of the sort of the some of the goofy conversations that go on. Bit like, for instance, the one about Pascal, was it? No, Rene Descartes,
Yeah.
and then Thoreau, I believe. There's a number of them that happen, and it's always really interesting. You seem to really enjoy getting kind of dumb characters to kind of like almost grate up against these huge concepts. Like it's like can you talk about that? I mean, like, is it the case that do you think there's something to be said about tackling serious things in a frivolous way, or even kind of vice versa, kind of being kind of frivolous about kind of quite serious things. I mean, I often think kind of like your gangsters, the way the way you characterize them, it's almost camp, but not in a bad way. Kind of not kind of flamboyant, cartoony kind of way, because because it's so meticulous, kind of the dialogue that you create, kind of all these kind of misunderstandings and sort of vulgarizations, the way they vulgarize kind of like everything they talk about. Like, do you think there's a kind of a high camp to like these sort of gangster sort of figures? I mean, like, is that something you remember, like these sort of funny gangsters?
I mean, when I did the book, The Company Stories, I wrote about a lot of these guys who were working on these illegal pursuits in a warehouse. They would just talk. They would sometimes sit on beach chairs outside on a hot summer night. It's 95 degrees, no air conditioning in the 1970s, and they're just sweating their asses off, farting and eating pizza and telling jokes and drinking beer. But as far as those characters, I mean, just the last week, Alex and I did this show about Jordan Peterson and other stylists, and if you look at some of the comments that he's gotten there, people are always trying, even the dumbest people are always usually trying to talk about this or that in a higher way, a higher philosophical concept, and they often fail. And so the best way to sometimes get around things is to have people talking around the particular things. They're not necessarily going to be smart enough to know. Neither of the dreamers, the senior or junior dreamer who appear.
But it's very tricky to write that down. You know, it's like it seems so effortless, like like you'd imagine conversation to be. But that kind of, like I was saying, that sort of back answers thing. It's such a kind of, it's almost like. Like it is like pure comedy, kind of like in a kind of vaudeville kind of way, kind of the way you're kind of using their voices and you're using their sort of slang, all this stuff that I imagine if you haven't heard it from kind of TV or whatever, you probably heard it yourself growing up in sort of the neighborhood where you grew up in. Like it's like, is there something kind of particularly fun for you in kind of like you're weaving these kind of this kind of dialect, the way kind of they speak, this kind of mock gangster kind of speak, you know.
Well, I mean, it is fun. I mean, just to give you a different perspective, I'm writing now the first play of my Jason and the Argonauts quintet of plays that I'm going to do, and the first play is going to be called The Dream Animal. So when you're talking about something, I mean, we're not gonna have the Medea section. We're not gonna have the Golden Fleece section right in the first play. This is setting up how Jason comes about, and two of the best characters that I'm having fun with are Zeus and Hera, the god and goddess that are propelling this. And if you ever saw Jason and the Argonauts, the 1950s film or the early 60s film,
yes.
The Anna Blackman played Hera, and I like the fact when they're looking down and they're manipulating. So those two characters, for example, I was just doing a scene this morning where Zeus is talking about, that there must be free will. Even the gods cannot control everything. Who do these Jews think they are with their God? What's his name? And meaning, Yahweh, the God who can't be spoken. So you
Mm.
have to
Yeah.
craft these characters. And so that first play is going to be character driven. It's about Jason and the Argonauts coming together, Peleus the king trying to save his kingdom. And in my version, Peleus isn't a bad king. It was Jason's father who was the tyrant. And anyway, so I'm playing with those little things, and you try to twist things that, but keep them still within the ballpark of reality. With the
Mm.
gangsters, they're not talking specifically. No one's talking about black holes. No one's talking about Einstein's theories of this or that. No one's talking about theorems or hypotheses.
Or if they are, they're kind of absolutely mangling it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, well, because the equivalent of kind of over here would be the kind of I suppose the East End gangster, the Cockney gangster, and that's just that's just it's such. I mean, it's so distinguished by a certain kind of way of speaking, and I suppose kind of all sorts of like class implications too. But it's also kind of a weird little thing too, because it's become a whole kind of culture in itself, the way kind of people talk, like the whole, obviously gangsters. There's a kind of hierarchy with people talking down to people, and it's very kind of masculine and brusque, but it's also kind of they're kind of like mostly they're kind of young guys. They're kind of like they're straight guys. They kind of it's so there's a kind of how should we call it? A kind of a norm cornish. I don't know how to put it. So something very basic and sort of simple, but that kind of rings true about these guys. But at the same time, almost feels affected. You know what I mean? I think that's probably why kind of this is a sort of interesting book, because I don't like I was saying, kind of that those ideas, that whole idea we have of gangsters is a bit anachronistic nowadays, and it's sort of the new gangsters we have. They're not kind of Big Frank or Paulie Marabelli. They're kind of like oligarchs, aren't they? And it's a whole different story. Sorry, going off on a tangent, I guess there, but do you ever feel that like do you ever like get worried about kind of like, oh no, he wouldn't say that, or she wouldn't say this, do you ever get worried about authenticity? I suppose is what I'm getting at. Like, do you ever get worried that like you might let something slip past you?
If you know the characters, whether I'm writing as Hera, the Greek goddess, or as Joey Greco, the New York mafiosi, if I know the character, I can put them in any situation. I could have a dialogue between Hera and Joey Greco at a pizza parlor, and it would be as convincing as it could be, because I know those characters. And it's about creating, when you're swirling a lot, you think about the way characters would be, and you can envision them. Once you've got that, you're locked in, and all of these little characters, even if the little minor characters that come in, the Japanese fellow who's the Yakuza guy, he says a few interesting little things in between, but he's clearly the third wheel in that scene. And so it is what it.
Yeah, I asked this because I read a lot. I read a lot of fiction, by young writers too, who try to write characters, and there's always something, especially if they're kind of quite inexperienced writers, and they're trying to write someone who's obviously very different from themselves, and that should be encouraged, of course. But it's always tricky, when you've got young writers writing sort of middle-aged kind of people, or what have you. Sometimes it doesn't always ring true. Sometimes you always feel like they're missing something essential. And like, how does one get inside the head of a character? Of course, you talk about immersion and such, but do you sit and think kind of like, because you talk about as long as you've got the character, you have confidence in it. But does it feel like you have to, in a way, kind of play act the character in your head? You have to kind of try and allow yourself to think like the character, or like Zeus, like up on Mount Olympus, or are you just kind of distantly, puppeting kind of these characters? Kind of, can you?
Well, they're all puppets of a sort, but if I observe someone that I meet, it's very easy, because you can see body language, and in your mind you can shift the body as they do. if I were doing, say, a novel with, you know, a Jimmy Cagney like character, well, I know the way Jimmy Cagney moves. I know the way he sneers. You know, uh, and in the same way, for example, I've never met him, but for example, if I were to write a novel with a character based on Jordan Peterson, I could nail that character because I know the rapid fire cliches that come to mind. I know his little pouty boy frown, and if someone confronts him, I'll know the way he could pass. You can see that, and you know, again, these a lot of these kinds of characters are just so ingrained in my childhood that they come out rather easily. Now, if I'm doing cowboy characters,
But is that the thing then, Dan? It's not just that they're an idea of a character. They're an embodied character, you know, who has a way of moving, and you know, it's not a kind of, because I feel like that's a mistake that a lot of writers too. Like the characters themselves are just aren't really characters at all. They're more just kind of like just a collection of um, sort of very suggestive things. But I think like you always seem to kind of, whenever I read your characters, they always do feel so animated to me.
Well, I've said many times before, plot is character. No one's going to care about the white whale. You know, you have to have the characters. One of the reasons, I mean, not one of the major reason that Moby Dick is a great novel is the characters, not just Ishmael, not just Ahab, but all of the minor characters, Starbuck, all the Pacific Islander characters. The little black Pip, the cabin boy, is well sketched out. And that's something, for example, if you look at his first few novels, Omu or Taipei, he didn't do to that degree. I think they're both very good books. They're good adventure books. And if you've never read Omu or Taipei, you should. You should read White Jacket. You should read anything by him. But clearly,
I'll be a scrivener too. That's pretty good, in my estimation.
Yeah, but that's a short story. I'm talking about longer works. Billy Budd is not as great as a lot of people say it is, but it still has a lot of good stuff in it. But clearly, you're reading that to find out about these characters. If you're reading any great book or watching any great film, it's about the characters. If you're watching Apocalypse Now, it's because you care about the Martin Sheen character and some of the characters on that boat with him. They may not be as well developed as a novel would develop those characters, but they each get their little moments where you get a little idea about who the character is. And in film,
that's very true. But do you feel a personal attachment or animosity to these characters yourself? You know, although I know, like, but do you ever think, oh, Big Frank, or that fucker, I hate him, or like, or are they all your children? You know, do you ever like, do you think to yourself, you know, I'll feel glad when so and so gets his comeuppance?
I mean, the closest I can say in recent years that I've come to that is when people have complained about the Danny Wagner character in some of my plays being too there. And so doing some of these things like Jason and the Argonauts, I mean, I have Danny Wagner in there. Danny Wagner is playing Zeus, but it feels interesting. And I know that no one in drama has ever used a character like Danny Wagner as much before. And it feels right to do that. Although I don't particularly like my doppelgangers. I like the doppelganger here, Lil Danny, simply because he doesn't appear that much.
I think that's one of the most interesting things about your doppelgangers, though, kind of how dislikable they can be, while at the same time, kind of how close they can come. Like, I mean, that's the whole thing about Vincetti Brothers that was so interesting to me. I was like, a good quarter way through the book, I was like, I don't know if I like this guy. It's very odd. But like,
you don't have to like a character. You don't have to like a character. You just have to understand the character to a degree. And you don't have to understand everything.
Yes, but it's especially strange. But it can be especially strange when we're seeing things through the lens of that character with them as a narrator, so to speak. Very very literary, but it's rather risky. And you pointed out that very few writers have done it themselves, like to sort of repeatedly use kind of something that resembles yourself, that is an analog of yourself, shall we say, as a motif in your work. You know, you are there in your work a lot, even if it's not you. And kind of it's almost daring us to kind of like sort of ask, well, you know, is like how because every time we get it, it's like a sort of a different Danny or Manny or what have you, but different in different ways, and not consistently not you, if that makes any sense.
Well,
so that yeah, it's very daring for a sustained thing that you to do, like book to book.
Well, you don't want to do the same type of thing. I mentioned this Henry Matsumi character. He's obviously farther from me in terms of race than he is from other characters, but he's the only doppelganger of mine in the fictive side that moves through time. And we don't. If you read all of the short stories and the novel that he last appears in, which is called The Scorpion Swam, that we don't know how old he is. He could have been born in the 60s like I did. He could have been born around 1980. Sometimes he seems in the 1990s to be a child. At sometimes he seems to be a teenager. So we don't know about that. But one of the things it does is by having a specific focus, like the way Woody Allen has the Woody Allen Schlemiel character in a lot of the films in his golden age and earlier, is it takes off people misinterpreting that Big Frank is me, or that the Norwegian is me, or that Paulie is an aspect of me, or that Bit von Reingold is all of these perverse, Dan must love to just shit on the women that he fucks, because he writes about Bit von Reingold who's shitting on the women.
But at the same time, one gets the sense that you're letting Bit von Reingold, for instance, like say things that, for instance, you would never say, but kind of would secretly quite like to.
There's nothing I don't say that I won't say, and the only time other than threatening the president.
Well, on that note, let's take a change to this conversation. I want to talk about jokes, because jokes are a big thing in this book, and they're kind of a recurring thing. And
that's something that goes back to my Western. If you read my Western novel,
it goes back to your Western, but surely isn't it also in Edge of the Shon too? I believe jokes.
Here and there, not to the degree here, but yeah, I do.
Not to the same degree, but just to say that kind of jokes are a kind of recurring thing, kind of like as a kind of motif or whatever you want to call it, that kind of happen to sort of break things up and sort of like in conversation, like what are all these jokes that you've sort of collected, or do you have to like go out looking for a joke, or when you hear a joke, do you go, that would be perfect for this scene?
If I have, say, 50 jokes in the book, 3 or 4 of them are ones that came to mind as being appropriate, they just bubbled up. The rest I would like joke about, some philosopher or something, and I'd see, 27 jokes, and I'd say, oh, that's the best joke. Joke about scatology. Oh, that's the best shit joke, or whatever it might be.
What's your favorite joke in The Grand and the Glorious that you can remember?
Oh God, I can't remember. I mean, a lot of them are, funny. I mean, I don't know what.
There's one about baby Hitler being saved from the river by priests, and there's the one about the masochist and the dead cow, and I mean they're all rather quite blue. But
I'll give you an example. I just stumbled upon this, for example. So on page 114. A few years ago, a pal of mine asked me to go duck hunting out on the island. I mean, I'd never done it and thought it would be boring as fuck, but given that he knew my profession, he felt it was a natural way to just get together and learn more about each other. I had met him at a friend's house when that friend was, I misspelled it, was trying to set me up with a friend of hers. Let me just make that correction. I'm anal. With a friend of hers. I had no interest in a female friend, but her brother Jack seemed like a nice guy. And we got to talking about sports, and he mentioned that he had an extra ticket to an upcoming football game in a few weeks, the New York Giants versus the Washington Redskins. So I went. It was a dull game where the Giants blew a touchdown lead and the game ended in a tie of 24. Then a few weeks later, when I saw Jack at a local diner, he mentioned to me that he was going to go duck hunting that coming weekend with a pal of his, but the pal had twisted his ankle badly, so could not make it, and so he asked me if I'd come along. I enjoyed bullshitting with Jack through the whole football game, so why not, I thought. When I was doing the hunting, though, well, my mind changed. I mean, rifles are different than pistols. And the odd thing was that despite being pretty good at an assortment of pistols, I'd never shot a rifle before. And in doing so in a bow with the kickback, well, I almost fell into the drink. That gave Jack a good laugh. I couldn't shoot one of them big pea shooters for shit, but Jack and his pooch, Junior, a setter or something, were experts. He shot 3 ducks in 2 hours, and the dog went and got the carcasses. He tried to show me a few times how best to shoot the gun, but the truth was it wasn't the shooting I liked, that it was the nature. It was the nature and the fact that Jack was just a pleasant guy. Lots of people who barely knew me or knew me who knew me through others came to the wrong idea that they first get that I ain't a 9 to 5 sort of a field. But Jack just accepted and even said that he was in no position to judge. Anyway, so then it's actually not a joke, but it's about the goose that's flying upside down. And I just randomly came upon that one day, and the term whiffling, and that when a goose flies upside down, it's called whiffling. And I said, I've got to put that in the book. Now, it's not a joke actually here, but that moment is one of those things where, as people send me things, or I'm looking through stuff, or something pops up on my Facebook feed, or someone sends me an email or something, and I thought that's an interesting way to have a moment of calm in the book. And in a lot of the way, the jokes also come to me in that kind of way too. There's the one about the guy who ascends heaven in ladders and ends up with a fat guy who wants to shit on him or something that I found in a book. And so you just put those things in.
They're kind of little moments where you can kind of release a bit of the tension. It was Freud who said that kind of jokes are about relieving sexual tension, and I think it's you said that. I think kind of it's not been said before that kind of you're actually one of the great writers, I think, of sexual tension. Like there's so much kind of weird kind of everything from kind of like awkwardness and kind of but obviously there's quite macho types in here, misogynists, a lot of homophobes and sort of like, people who are quite insecure about their masculinity, and there's kind of there's lots of talk about women, and there's a lot of back and forth between women. It sometimes seems to be quite flirty, other times is jarring. Like, so for instance, like I forget, but there's a bit where somebody's trying to get with a woman and she says, all right, as long as you don't rape me, and like it like totally throws him. It's just in times where there's all this political correctness going on, and kind of we're kind of reconsidering the ways in which kind of we think about sexual issues. It's really interesting to see kind of get like elbows deep into all this and really like dredge up some of like the more uncomfortable aspects of kind of like the what do they call it, the gender wars, men from Mars. Like, do you see that changing in any ways over the last book or so? Because that's really been at the forefront, I think, kind of men and women, and kind of the vicissitudes of sexuality and attraction. Kind of like, is this kind of something you've been consciously thinking about, or is this something that's kind of like that's just part of you? Do you think? Do you think kind of like do you think sexuality is a big part of your creativity?
I mean, it depends on the book. You're not going to find a lot of sexuality in my Western novel, but in Levels, the main character is one of 15. There's a young boy, a young black kid, and the rest, then a few young girls, and then there's like 10 females that he could potentially have sex with. And so he's in this kind of exercise, and a few of them he does have fantasies about in varying degrees, some blatant, some less so. In this one, as far as I recall, there are some female characters on the Sally T side that certainly have disappointed him. The main one is the Ella character on the Joey Greco side. And certainly the best tension comes with the fake Joey Greco, because there's a scene early on. The fake Joey Greco seems to have been replaced by whatever government agency is running this Operation Thrush. And if you go back to the 1960s, Thrush was the evil nemesis organization from the man from U.N.C.L.E., which was a spy series. So he's replaced, and it seems like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe or a week or so, maybe before the real Joey Greco is replaced by the fake Joey Greco. The real Joey Greco might have had a one-night stand with the Ella character. So the fake Joey Greco comes in, and he's sensing this, that the real Greco may have boinked her, but now she's involved with one of his underlings, Tommy Totsa, or the other guy. And Tommy Totsa is a character that first appeared in a play called Lo Lord Thou Ridest, my hurricane play. So in Hawaii,
I've not read that.
yeah. So there's a crossover there, but so there's a tension. You end up with a triangle in a sense between the two Joey Grecos, the fake and the real one, and the Ella character. And again, I base that simply because when I was writing the book, or when I started it, I was in contact with this woman who I based the Ella character on, and she's a handful.
Yeah, well, it's I'm going to say like it's like it seems like you like you're kind of drawn to kind of I don't know you depict a lot of kind of interesting relationships between men and women, and sometimes they're quite turbulent. But other times, I mean, it just seems clear to me that like you're really interested in especially increasingly, more and more actually as we go on, like with these books you're writing, you're really interested in sort of like looking into this dynamic of sort of men and women, and it's I think it's just interesting to juxtapose that with kind of all these political trends going on now, where kind of it's where it's a lot more touch and go, and it's a lot more you can't say that, you can't do that. No, don't that's not very popular. And and obviously there are people in this book saying kind of all sorts of kind of not just incorrect things, but like just bizarre things about kind of the opposite sex, and it's do you think we're living in a sort of really repressed age? Do you think we have a long way to go, or do you think it's changed a lot? Like since you were young, Dan. Like, do you think like things have like slid back a bit, like, or are we less willing to accept a kind of an art that kind of actually deals directly with kind of sexuality and all its ickiness?
Well, I think it's better that people. I mean, it's better that gay people can get married now in this country. It's better that you can, if you think you're a boy and you were born a girl, that you can get an operation. I mean, I would think that I would hope people wait until they're 18 or so, because people sometimes slide up and down in their sexual attractions and their feelings and stuff, and the human brain doesn't fully develop until they're 25. So I don't think, for example, that 8 or 9-year-olds are in a position to say, "Mommy, I'm really a boy," if you were born a girl. But if you're 18 or 19 and you've done it, so I mean, those things are good. I think it's good. As far as sexual dynamics, I mean, I'd say there's probably a little bit less sexual violence towards women over the years, and that's also a good thing.
Arguably, yes. But do you think we've become more puritanical? Not as a result, but as a corollary. Do you think it's right that we've well, maybe I'm generalizing here, and I wouldn't want to do that, but like I just sometimes feel that kind of we're much more cautious now to kind of talk about kind of sort of these, it's either kind of black and white,
Well, for example, someone could say in that opening scene, "How dare I write of rape from a woman's perspective?" Well, why not? I mean, it's like I've done it from the male perspective. It's clearly not endorsing it. Clearly, the woman has been traumatized to the point where she's outside of her body almost, or trying to project herself outside. So it's one of those things.
There's also there's a throwaway line. I can't remember who says it in the book as well, which kind of struck me as interesting, although odd. Someone says something like, "Oh, well, so what if they want to be a woman? Most women are fake anyway." And he's like, I just thought it's very. It's not an opinion you hear, but it's interesting.
Well, I mean, the characters are going to say things. I mean, the characters are going to say things that, especially when the stuff is set earlier in the book in the 50s and 60s, they're going to say things that people would not want to say. Although, in truth, you're on my Facebook page. you know that former boss of mine there, who every time I show a police video of black people being beaten or whatnot, he sends these stupid emojis, and I put up with it, and just for just to keep the peace, because he's a married relative of a good friend of mine. But by the same token, at some point he's gonna go too far. But I can't stop him from being an idiot. I can't stop him from making. He just doesn't get certain things. So there are going to be people, whether we're talking about race, sexuality, religion, or whatnot, that aren't going to get things. There are people who still think that Obama is a Muslim.
We should send them all a copy of a copy of your book.
Well, I mean, my problem with Obama is that he's a corporate suck boy. I don't care what his religion is. I mean, that's my issue with him. But most people won't even take. I mean, whether we're talking Obama or Peterson or whatnot, people dislike some of these people, and you can say, "Oh, that's good. He dislikes Jordan Peterson or thinks." But if it's for the wrong reason, then it kind of, you have to be aware of things. There's a lot of boo 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 going on your end. Are you
on my end? I'm sorry. Let me just adjust my microphone.